All right, welcome students. I'm Dr. Charles Ramos, and this is KNICA 098, Intercollegiate Pre-Participation Orientation. And I'm going to go over some objectives for this module. This is Module 2, so we are going to be learning about, and the objectives of this module are to understand academic transfer rules, determining the unit limit for transfer rule in the summer, define priority registration, and finally to review the injury and illness medical waiver. And one of our outcomes is going to be to perform or take the quiz that's going to be provided to you throughout this lecture. So you're going to be answering questions throughout this lecture, and that's the only way you're going to be able to get through the whole lecture. So make sure that you are answering all the questions as we go along. All right, so moving on here, the next portion that we're going to cover is transferring grades. So as noted on this slide, you're going to see that only C grades or better are transferable to any four-year institution, and exceptions for 1 or 2 D grades might be made by some institutions, but don't rely on that. Most schools are going to require at least C or better on all of your grades. But let's say for instance, if you do get a D grade on any of your courses, in, for example, English, math, science, or communications, those are never going to be transferable. And then D grades can't be used for the same course for an academic eligibility purpose at the community college level, but you are able to retake those courses to improve your grade, but only the units for the highest grade are going to be used. So you'll only be able to count the course with the higher grade towards your 24 units between seasons. And coming up here in this next slide is a quick little overview of how the transfer process works, or some of the prerequisites of transferring, depending on whether you're a qualifier or if you're a non-qualifier coming out of high school. So if you look at this chart here, it breaks it down on left to right here, and also depending on whether you're transferring to a D1, D2, D3, or NAIA school. But just looking at this very top portion, if you look at the minimum qualification, so averaging, if you're a qualifier, averaging 12 units for each full-time term, but you can't take more than 5 full-time semesters at the community college level. And then as a non-qualifier out of high school, there's some more prerequisites here. So you have to average 12 units for each full-time term, and then you must earn an AA degree. 6 units transfer from English, 3 to 4 units transfer from your math, and then 3 from physical or natural science. And the required GPA for both of these scenarios is 2.5. Right, and let's say, for instance, if you want to make up a class and you want to take advantage of summer school. So here we have some limits on that. So the first one is a maximum of 8 units for each summer school session is deemed transferable. So that's the maximum. And then for the total amount of units that can come from summer school is 16. And summer school is a really great opportunity for student athletes to either make up classes that they got a D grade or worse, and also if your scholastic goals are a little bit higher than everyone else, if you're trying to get into a certain academic program that has more requirements or prerequisites, then it's a really good way for an athlete to get ahead. But what you should know about DVC is that each summer session is 6 weeks long. So everything that's typically taught in a 16-week course is now condensed into a 6-week long course, and not all courses are offered in the summer session. But if you do take one of these courses, there's going to be a lot of work to be done in a very short window, so it can be very easy to fall behind. So if you're contemplating on whether or not to take a summer session, you have to make sure that you're fully committed to doing it, because once it starts, you have to commit every week to completing assignments and making sure that you're staying on top of all the requirements that your professor has for that class. So I wanted to highlight a resource that I provided for you in Canvas. You're going to see this in one of the pages for Module 2. And this is the 2021 guide for two-year transfers for student athletes at the two-year colleges. So this is available for you to download on Canvas, and you can view it on Canvas as well. And on there I note that pages 11 through 17 are really good. There's really good content for you to view on there, but before we get there and before I show you that, there's also a really good section here that kind of tells you about the transfer rules and how they apply to you, and there's 4 different things to note on there. So determining if you are a transfer student athlete, deciding where you're going, understand your initial eligibility status, and then making sure you have registered with the NCAA eligibility center if needed. So I like this because it kind of gives you, it gives you a case study, but it also has questions for you to ask about your current situation. So knowing if you're able to transfer, there's a few questions such as have you been a full-time student at a 2 or 4-year college during a regular academic term? Have you practiced or competed with a college team? This includes during any full-time and part-time enrollment. Have you received any athletics aid from college while attending summer school? And have you received any financial aid while attending NCAA D1 school during the summer? And then it tells you if you answered yes to all of these, or any of these, then you are a transfer student athlete. And then if you answered no to all of them, then you're probably not a transfer student athlete, and that you should contact the compliance office at the school that you're trying to apply to. So I think that's one of the best pieces of advice, is that if you are not sure about the answers to some of these, that you should contact the compliance office at the school that you're trying to go to. So skipping down to page 11. So this is where it kind of gives you another overview of your potential path, and it's based on some prerequisites. So again, it's kind of basing this off of if you're a qualifier straight out of high school or if you're a non-qualifier. And so it asks you a few questions, and then if you answer yes, then you kind of go towards the green check mark, and if you don't, then you go towards the right. So for a non-qualifier, there's more prerequisites. So it says at your 2-year school, did you graduate from your 2-year school? You must have earned 25% of your credit hours at the 2-year school awarding your degree, complete at least 3 semesters or 4 quarters as a full-time student, and then complete 48 transferable credit hours if your school uses semesters, or 72 transferable credits if they use quarters. And then 6 hours have to come from English, 3 hours from math, and 3 hours from natural physical science. And finally, that you earned a GPA of 2.5. And so if you said yes to all, then you can practice, compete, and get an athletic scholarship as soon as you transfer. If yes to questions 1 through 3, and no to question 4, and your GPA is between 2 and 2.49, then you can practice and get an athletic scholarship as soon as you transfer, or you can compete, or you cannot complete until you sit out for a year, an academic year of residence. That's kind of based on your GPA there, whether you go to the left or to the right here. And so that's someone going from a 2-year school to a 4-year. The next scenario is someone going from a 4-year school, then going back to a 2-year, like a junior college, and then going back to a 4-year. So all these scenarios are laid out here for you, depending on what scenario you're in. But it kind of lays it out, gives you a general overview of what to expect. Okay, so moving on to priority registration requirements. So at DVC, student athletes get priority registration, which is a very good benefit because it allows you to get the courses that you want at the times that you want, so that it works around your practice and game schedule as best as possible. But in order to have that priority registration, you have to meet some prerequisites. So first, you have to have no debt to the school. So if you've been enrolled at DVC before, or you're currently enrolled and you haven't paid any outstanding tuition or anything like that, then you will not be able to register ahead of time. And you must be in good academic standing, so 2.0 GPA or higher. So if, let's say, this is your second year at DVC and you've fallen under a 2.0, then you're not going to be able to get priority registration. You have to have your courses posted in your student planning portal. So in your other counseling course, you guys kind of take care of that stuff. So as long as you're following what your counselors are telling you to do and you do it on time, then you'll be okay. Complete math and English assessments. Make sure that you do those. Complete online orientation after you apply. So there's an orientation portion that you have to do. And then finally, your head coach has to submit your ID number. So if you haven't made contact with the head coach of the sport that you're trying to play for, then they're not going to know to submit your student ID for priority registration. So that all these things, and especially at the end, knowing that your head coach knows who you are and they have your student ID and that they submit it is going to be a priority so that you get priority registration. All right, moving on to D3 schools in the NCAA. So you're going to note that there's some differences when trying to transfer to a D3 school compared to D1 and D2. First of all, they have higher academic standards. They offer intercollegiate sports, but they don't have athletic scholarships. So there's no way you're going to get a scholarship for athletic abilities. The only financial aid available is based on financial need, and it ranges from very little to up to 50% of your tuition. And then eligibility is not certified by the NCAA, so there's no need to register or create an account with the eligibility center. Then there's admission requirements, which are set by each individual institution, and most of these schools have very rigorous and high academic standards, and they usually require a 3.0 GPA or higher. So that's one thing to note. As you're looking at different schools, you're going to note that all these requirements are going to be higher academically. D3 sports seasons are typically shorter than the other two divisions, and there's no non-traditional seasons as found in D1 and D2, where, for example, if you're a baseball player in the fall, you may have a non-traditional season where you get to practice and have some scrimmages. At the D3 level, they don't have that NTS season. All right, so the final topic for Module 2 talks about injury or illness. And what we're talking about here is the 3C2A Constitution and Bylaws document, Bylaw number 1. As noted here in pages 64 through 66, there's a section called Illness or Injury. And it states that a student athlete may have a year of collegiate competition reinstated for reasons of medical hardship. So medical hardship is defined as an incapacity resulting from injury or illness that occurred under certain specific conditions. And it also mentions that a Form 4 is filed with the conference commissioner of the conference in which the injury or illness occurred, and then the conference commissioner may approve the waiver based on the following criteria. So if we look at that document, which I'll show you right now in a minute, you'll see everything that's necessary. But the major criteria is that you played, or as a student athlete, you played in less than 30% of the team's regular season game schedule, and that you did not play in any contest or game past the halfway point of the regular season. And finally, that a licensed physician certifies that you had a season-ending injury or illness. So if we look at the document here, you'll notice that it goes into a lot more in-depth into what's necessary. But what I want to point you towards here is this section called extenuating circumstances, because it states here that under this, it gives you two major things. The student athlete failed to complete the entire season of competition at the institution as a result of a life-threatening injury. So these exemptions are kind of reserved for people that had life-threatening injuries or a very severe injury that took them out of the season. So those documents are on Canvas for you to review and to download as well. But for now, that's all I have for you. If you have any questions, you can definitely reach out to me.